Thank you everyone for joining today's Disaster Empire Quick Views, where we provide you with bite-sized conversations with thought leaders in resilience, including business continuity, risk, crisis, security, safety, and related disciplines. I am thrilled to have the amazing Michele Turner with us today for the Disaster Empire webcast. Michele recently published her book, Lessons Learned, Short Stories of Continuity and Resilience, and I wanted to have her on to talk more about it and her resilience experience. So a little bit about Michele, if you don't already know her. She has roughly 30 years of experience in the areas of governance, risk, and compliance, a Master's of Science degree in Business Continuity from Norwich University. She is the Global Senior Director, Deputy Chief Continuity and Resilience Officer at Expedia Group, and has also led work at Amazon and Microsoft. She is an international speaker on the topic of business continuity, risk management, and related areas. She is also a requested guest lecturer at the University of Washington on such topics as cybersecurity and operational risk, and a course instructor and board director for Disaster Recovery Institute International. Michele is a resident of Washington State and a very proud grandma of two amazing grandsons. Thank you for sharing your impressive background with us, because it is impressive, and I really would love to dive in. So really, I think I'd like our listeners to understand, what was the spark or the original idea that compelled you to write Lessons Learned, Short Stories of Continuity and Resilience, and how long did it take you to complete?
Well, goodness, let's start. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to chat here. The book took about 10 years, and I'll explain. I wrote a couple of things down, jotted some stuff down a while ago, and finally, round about 2000, the end of 2000, I thought, you know what, if you're going to do it, just do it. And so I decided to really focus in on closing some things out, and the key was there were things, both from a professional and a personal perspective, that I had gone through where it felt like maybe I was the only one going through this at this time. And I'm sure that I was sure that I wasn't, but it sure felt like I was. And so there was a little bit of feeling alone in that respect. And so by documenting these things in the book, I could then share with others to say, hey, if you're going through this, know that you are not alone. Know that what you're going through, definitely, if you want to reach out and chat through some things, feel free to do so, and feel free to take a look at some of the examples in the book on how I've addressed things. So that was really the impetus for writing the book, just wanting to share stories.
And I know really I enjoyed it very much, and without giving too much away, can you share how in the book your parents, your faith, and your upbringing really inspired your career path? And can you share a little bit more about, as you say in the book, your 30 years of subject matter expertise and 50 years of living with our listeners?
Yes. So from a faith perspective, I am a Mennonite. Which is, yes, cousin to the Amish, so to speak. My father's a Mennonite minister. And so with that, there's a lot of giving back. So for example, going to college, we didn't just learn about Guadeloupe, as an example. I actually went to Guadeloupe and I did a service trimester where I would do a service for the family that I was living with there. So first part of the service trimester, I taught English in a French orphanage, and then the second part, I did overseas translations for the family that I was living with, as they had a company there, a transportation company. And so really the being able to give back, the being able to make sure that you contribute, all of that is part of this, in addition to other items from a faith-based perspective. And so that value, those pieces are something I carry with me. And so when I realized, or when business continuity, at the time business recovery, came up as an option for me, it was just a natural fit. And I say in the book that it wasn't something that I necessarily chose. It just became a part of what I was doing, because it fits so well with giving back to others. If you're looking to assist people with understanding the optimization of their network, then you can lean more on the disaster recovery side. If you want to do more on the process and help team members understand criticality of functions, then you lean more on what used to be the business recovery side under that business continuity umbrella. So all of those pieces really tie in. And again, my father was a Mennonite minister, and there's just a lot that I have taught, or that I was taught by my mom and dad from a faith-based perspective and giving back and being humble and all of that I just thought fit really, really well with what we were doing. So the book is actually dedicated to the two of them.
Excellent. And I think what resonates with me as well is so many of us, right, that get into the resilience work. It wasn't something that we picked out of, in our high school counseling sessions or testing, it's something that we found along the way, either, like you said, as a calling from other aspects of our lives often, or sometimes people are voluntold, and fall into it, but find a real affinity. And I know that happened for me as well after September 11th and joining the Red Cross. And I just loved the disaster aspect of the work and just jumped in. So thank you so much for sharing that journey. And I think one of the other things from the book, and also from listening to Mark Hoffman's podcast that you did recently for the Resilience Think Tank, was the concept of parse. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, really how it guides you and how you think it could be useful to other professionals?
Well, so specifically as it relates to the book, as I mentioned, there were personal as well as professional lessons learned. And as you mentioned, it's over a 30-year career and actually 52 years of being here that I felt, why don't I do a lot for organizations in terms of assisting them through business interruptions and crises. I had to take a look and say, you've been in this thing way too long not to have done a lot of that on your personal side. So let's take a look at how that relates. And that's how I came up with Parse. Parse really does help the organization, but as I started to take a look at it, prepare, assess, remediate, sustain, examine, there are so many things on the personal side of the house that I was tracking to with that, that I felt that regardless if someone was a business continuity or resilience professional, they could get something out of the book. But if you really were looking at it from more of a personal life understanding, development, whatever, you could also get something out of it as well. So yeah, Parse has really been something that I've used not only for organizations, but I have to go back every now and again and say, wait a minute, Michele, you said in chapter 2, so keep yourself honest. What lesson did you learn? And maybe you need to relearn it.
Yeah. That's great. I think one of the other things too about the book, which I felt was a little bit different than we see from our colleagues, is that how you use the format of short stories to really resonate and bring across, all of the concepts and the ideas in the book. How did that come about? Is that, an idea that you took from somewhere, just kind of borrowing that, or is that something that you just really felt would help to share your story and share that information better?
I thought it would just help to share the information a little bit better. So when I develop Parse, when you look at, for example, P for prepare, when it comes to business continuity, resiliency management, you know that you definitely have to be really, really clear on, well, why do we need this in the first blessed place? Because if you're not clear, then you're not exactly sure, well, how do I get there if I don't exactly know where there is? And it's the same thing in life. So that clarity is paramount. Also, when you're communicating, you really need to understand, who are my sponsors? Not just who are my supporters. Supporters are wonderful. They will give you great insight, and that's a beautiful thing. But a sponsor is going to be speaking your name in rooms that you're not in. And as I mentioned in the book, one of my biggest sponsors is my Aunt Bernice. Was my Aunt Bernice, and she was in academia, and I would always ask her my but why questions. So one of the but why questions was, but why can't I go to school yet? And I was about 3 or 4. And so Aunt Bernice was like, you know what? I don't have a really good answer for you, so let's work on that. And she did, and that's how I was able to start kindergarten a little bit earlier. And so it's really understanding who your sponsors are, and then also understanding sort of who's who in the crew, making sure that you understand from a responsible, accountable, consultant, informed, and all of that really meshes into the professional side really well. And then cost, of course. You want to understand what the cost of doing or not doing something is. You don't want to put so much cost or funding into a control where you find that the actual risk would probably, the cost of the control far exceeds the risk that you're looking to take. And so it's really understanding what the cost of doing business really is. So that's just sort of walking through the P, prepare, to give you an example of sort of what I was thinking of there in terms of correlating those two pieces.
I love that concept as well. And I've been thinking a lot about efficiency. And efficiency in terms that takes us away from more the administrative side of doing our work to actually the consultative, which I think is where the value is for the business, and really building that resiliency with them and consulting to them and thinking about how they can be more resilient through their planning and preparedness and exercising. So yeah, that's really great. I wanted to ask you, Michele, if you could say one or two things that you really want people to take away from your book, what would they be?
Slow down in order to speed up. There are times when we are so focused on something and we go, but we don't take the time to step back to really maybe assess what's going on. What should our next steps be? Things of that nature. Really making sure that we take time. And one of the things I talk about in the book, that brakes aren't there just to totally stop you so you don't get to go anywhere. Brakes are there to apply as necessary so that you can better control the situation that you're in. And I definitely have used that both from a professional as well as a personal perspective. So that's one of the messages. The other message is, take the risk. Take the calculated risk. Trust yourself to know that you've got this, that you know what you're doing. And so when you go to make a comment, let's say if you're at the table, sometimes you'll be in a meeting at the table and you'll want to say something, but then you're not too sure because maybe it's only your first or second meeting, so you hold back. And then someone says the exact thing that you would have said, and now you have an attitude. Well, you know what? Take that risk. You are at that table for a reason. You know your stuff. Trust your gut and move forward. Take that calculated risk. So I guess taking a step back in order to move forward, but taking the risk, those would be two key things that I'd be focused on to communicate to the team.
Thank you for those points. And I think so many of us in the field are so driven, right, and so dedicated to our work that concept of self-care, is so important for us. And I've taken that away from the book. I'm definitely listening to that, Michele, because, it's really important. I keep saying I'm going to get to the beach this summer, right? And how many times have I gone to the beach? Once. And so I'm really starting to think, what can you give up on other sides of your life so that you can actually take that break? It's really important.
Exactly. And that speaks to what I call work-life integration, because I don't call it work-life balance. Because for me, there is no balance because my family is going to be my priority. So there's no balance there that I'm trying to figure out. They're priority. So how do I make sure that I can integrate things appropriately where I still feel comfortable that things are being managed the way that I would want them to be managed. And so it's really making sure that you hold yourself accountable as well to draw the boundaries, because you can be up all night till 2 a.m. and then the next day you see someone send you something at 1 or 2 a.m. and you're thinking, well, why'd they do that? Well, they did that because you showed them that you're going to be up till 1, 2 a.m. if you do it on a consistent basis. So it's really making sure that we show those boundaries, that we have that work-life integration, and we're able to take time for us. There's a story in the book where I definitely was not taking time for myself, and the results are right there in on the pages. So, yeah.
And thank you so much for sharing that. I also like the concept of raising your voice. No matter what status you are in your career or engagement with business partners and stakeholders, like you said, if you know your stuff and you have something important to say, really to say it, because I think that does hinder us. And I think we've seen some of the outfall of that from COVID over the last few years with programs that weren't as strong as maybe they could have been in that respect. And obviously there are a lot of reasons, for those things to have happened, but I hope that more of us are really speaking up and talking about resilience because it resonates so strongly with our business partners today.
Exactly. And I would say that I realize if you're immediately new to the area, that it's a little bit scary to be able to say something and to really engage, because you're new and you're not sure. But the reality is, and it's just the thing that I just underscore, you are at that table. And there's a reason that you're at the table. And maybe some of the risks that you take as being new to the industry might be a little bit different than the risks that I would take after 30 years. But you know what that is. What that stretch is for yourself. So I encourage people to really execute on that stretch for yourself. Take that risk. Understand what you are definitely capable of. Don't limit yourself.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is, writing can be a very intensive process. It's not an easy process. I've had the Disaster Empire blog for over 3 years, and it can be a lot.
Yeah.
How was that process for you? Can you share a little bit about that?
I'll tell you, as I mentioned, I had maybe a couple chapters written for about 10 years. But when I really decided, it's time, I have some stories to share, and I actually have some lessons that I've learned because I've applied these things. It's one thing to get a realization, but once you apply it, that's when you've learned it. And so once I started writing things down, it just started flowing out. And the biggest part was me being able to structure it in such a way that it made sense to other people. So it took a little bit of time to get that structure engaged. Definitely, it wasn't something that was just as soon as I wrote it, it was pristine and off I went. It wasn't like that at all. But definitely, it was very cathartic to get some things out and remind myself, hey, wait a minute, you went down this situation before and you learned some stuff. So don't forget that. I was blessed to be able to get those things on paper, and based on some of the feedback that I'm getting, I'm really excited that it's resonating with people.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing and for writing the book, being with us today to talk about it. I really appreciate it. Where can people buy Lessons Learned, Short Stories of Continuity and Resilience, and how can they connect with you? And then last, is there anything else that you want to share with people about the book that you haven't spoken to already?
Well, you can definitely go on to Amazon and get the book there. There's the paperback, there's the Kindle version, as well as Audible. You can also go to Barnes & Noble. It's online. So it's there, as well as Google and Apple and places such as that. Definitely, what I would love is if you get the book and you read it, give me some feedback. Give me feedback either via the reviews on Amazon or shoot me a message. I'm on LinkedIn, Michele Turner. So give me a holler. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you. And I listened to the Audible version and really enjoyed that it was in your voice, right? Because it really gave me a sense of more of you and who you are and what you're all about. So I really appreciated that. For me, I love, reading and holding the physical book. I have Kindle too, but sometimes I really enjoy the Audible as I'm doing other things, right? Yep, multitasking.
Exactly.
I admit it. But it was a great way as well.
Well, good. Thank you.
To enjoy your book. So thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you so much for sharing your journey with the audience. Really appreciate it and hope to have you back sometime.
Well, thank you again for inviting me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back.